Hello everyone and welcome back to Planet Coaster. We are just going to jump straight into the speed build today, and this is of course the Korra series where we are making something quite large and detailed based off of The Legend of Korra, the sequel to Avatar: The Last Airbender. And we are working on the male dorm area yet again. And starting out, we're working on this pretty neat little outbuilding that's just kind of, it almost looks like an exterior storage shed slash unit out on the back side here. It's pretty quaint and cool. It has those themes that we have established over the course of the series. You know, the golden pillars. It's going to have some wooden framing elements, a lot of windows to portray that kind of paper window or door look that you find in some Asian buildings. I'm using the tops of chimneys here at the beginning just as a test for these taller vase-like ceramics that you might find in Asia. You know, Asia is very well known for their ceramic capability, so you know you want to try and get some of those elements in there. But since it is like a shrine temple area, you know, they're not going to have overly decorative kind of ceramics. You're gonna see maybe some more simple stuff mixed into all this other fancier elements that's more for like the temple and things like that. Now, there's going to be some cleaning up to do this episode. We are starting out with a whole bunch of trees, bushes, and rocks, just so that we can get this bottom edge cleaned up and finalized, so we can start moving more northernly in the build. Now, I'm using mixtures of colors of rocks here, so we are using the alpine rocks and also, I believe, the kind of more plains rocks. I forget exactly. I'm not super well versed in what each theme set belongs in, but I just know using a couple different colors can help out a lot and keep the variety interesting enough. Sometimes you'll find pixel art or things, you know, limiting themselves to like a 3-tone, and this is kind of the same mindset. You know, you want to use 2 to 3 tones, and that way there's variety, but not an overwhelmingly large amount of it. I also want to go ahead and work a bit on this path that's going to wind its way up from a bridge in the middle of the mountainside here. And I want to do this one so I can know where some trees are going to go along the edge, because there is a little bit of a kind of hedgerow with those tall pine trees going up the side, and it does look pretty cool from afar. So I want to get these placed in our initial kind of border for the main path itself, because we're going to be building the rest of the path based off this edge line. It's going to hopefully assist with just aligning everything, getting the width kind of set in stone first, and it's going to just pay off in the end. And you know, you kind of want to do some heavy lifting earlier rather than later. It also helps because, you know, I'm doing kind of a high thought process things early on while I'm still fresh in the build, and then I move on to kind of the repetitive detailing later, because you can kind of turn your mind off a little bit for that stuff. You know, we've already established a lot of the theming elements, a lot of the potential details that we're going to get in here. So I want to get these curves made, some of the terrain sculpted, because this is stuff that I'm not super comfortable with, just because the terrain sculpting tools, you know, the mesh of the terrain is a little soft. You know, you can't get these really sharp cliff edges that you might find, say, in like the Rocky Mountains or in Asia, you know, where you're going to get these tall, very steep cliff sides with kind of flatter tops on them. So, you know, that's why I want to do this at the beginning. Now, we also need to manually place a whole bunch of trim along this curved plaza. And this is a pretty cool effect they have in the temple itself. We use this a lot in the upper kind of right section so far, and they kind of highlight the walkable areas using this more white stone, just to break up the surface. And that's something, you know, you can take into your own plazas if you want, you know, using 2 different tones or 3, as we already said with rocks. You can do the same with just about anything. So, you know, even buildings. So one wall of the building could be one color, and then details on top of it can be yet another, and then the roof can be a separate color from all of that. And then you have these three-tone buildings, and they look pretty nice. And limiting a color palette does help sometimes. Now, the textures, of course, just playing with some color, getting that right, taking a look at the water reflection of the pagoda. And here, I am using the Flatten to Surface tool to kind of get the tops of these large spines that come off the mountainside roughly laid out. And then we'll use a combination of that tool and the chisel tool to hopefully sharpen out and get some steep peaks and crevasses kind of working its way down the side here. And that is just a good way to get a natural-ish looking mountain. Now, we will be going back into these using some 3D rock elements, just so there's some more than just the flat texture on there. The flat texture does look good, you know, it is made very well, and you can layer textures fairly quickly in this game. So, you know, luckily with just that alone, I think it's successful. But adding just a little bit of rocks here and there on it definitely breaks up the surface and makes it just stand out that much more. We are using the tall kind of yellow poplar tree, and it is, you know, good to kind of stack these up, and you can kind of do a cone shape kind of sprouting upwards to make a large tree that has a lot of these kind of autumn colors, and that's a common tree that's in a lot of my reference art for this build. So, you know, I want to try and capture that at least a little bit. Here we are making a new kind of gazebo covered structure, and I want to get the spines laid out for the actual cone that's going to sit as the roof. And if you guys know how this goes, essentially you're just going to make about a quarter of it depending on how many sides it has, and then you can just copy and paste and rotate it around so many times, and then boom, you get yourself a nice covered spire. Now, this is an Asian one, so we are doing some more fancier things. Obviously, it's going to do a gentle slope upwards. We gotta have these kind of thicker spines where the tiles are used to kind of streamline and to seam together these different angles. And also, I want to get a slight curve inset into the roof line itself, and it's a little time consuming, but the little bit of extra effort just makes this building stand out on its own even more, and that's what we want in these areas. You want a few stand out kind of buildings, things to catch your eyes, and then areas that might be a little bit more plain standard looking, so that you can kind of rest there and take it all in. And working together, everything just kind of works in unison at that point. So I really like the way this roof kind of turned out. It makes it look like a little bit like a flower petal or something like that, maybe upside down, but it has a really nice feel to it. We're also going to be using some columns just to give it some larger support structures on the underside, and then we'll add our columns, dye them a little bit more of the white gold colors that's everywhere else in the build so far, and that is the main supporting structure for the roof itself. And we will mess with some baubles and color them different hues of gold and white just to make it look a little bit interesting on top and get this kind of cool spire look. Now, we did something similar on the last gazebo-like structure on the right side by the women's dorm. So the male side's going to have their own variant, you could say. And this one I think is a little bit smaller, just because it's not a perfect circle. So perfect circles obviously are going to be a little bit bigger in total area than this. I believe it's an 8-sided. Yeah, I think it's an 8-sided figure. And you know, it's just going to have a simple base. It's going to have that gold trim roof line that we've established in previous episodes. And then at this point, we're just going to build a little bit of a fountain, kind of water source for the plaza itself. And it's using the well asset, and we will just craft a quick little custom roof line here. you know, using the blue planks and then copy that over. And then at that point, you can kind of stitch everything together and make it all line up. And you can kind of throw a gold kind of top on that just to make it match the rest of the roof trim. We're also going to be using some wooden posts in the corners here. And I found a bucket, and I figured it would be cool to have multiples of these because they would have to go fetch their water and possibly use it either in training or possibly use it for bathing. You know, some people say the last episode, the last building that we worked on, looked maybe a little bit more like a bathhouse attachment to the area, and I partially agree with that, but also it doesn't make sense to have the bathhouse away from the women's dorm per se, and they don't have their own, so it's just one of those things where I just don't quite know 100% still what that building is used for. Now, we are making some tile sets that's going to be used to wrap the large kind of temple dorm-like building here on our right. And, you know, just like the previous buildings, I make these fairly quickly and they are used in different ways. So I start with one large tile, that's the first floor and the second floor kind of established. And then I go back in, make a copy of it, change it up a little bit, make a new tile that kind of incorporates different design decisions and motifs that will hopefully work together. And then you can even have a blank wall section to use to break up the different surfaces so that you don't have just a string of solid windows going all the way around the building. That would look a little weird. We're going to incorporate some round windows as well. And then at this point, you just kind of copy and paste these into the gray box structure. We'll be covering this a little bit more in the tutorial series next week about making these tile sets that I do for this build. But that's basically the idea. You can have more than just 4 tiles, obviously. The more you have, the more variety you are able to achieve. And minimum, I would stick with 3. 3 seems to be a decent number to go with. That way you get some variety. You can do repeating patterns in different ways. But, you know, again, more the better. But for these simple structures that are just kind of wrapped, 3 to 4 is about enough. And then you can always go back in and add some detail. So that's it for today's speed build. We're going to take a look at everything in real time, and you guys can tell me what you think. Alright, so here we are at the finished plaza for the men's dorm, surrounded by this nice low wall and have these rounded kind of entry gates. And everything just kind of came together really nice, I think, in here. You know, between just skinning these 2 buildings, adding the wood trim, and decorating the well area so that it feels like the plaza feels a little bit more lived in, used, because, you know, the buckets and things. But beyond that, I do plan on eventually making some more decorative, just little things to go around in the plazas and around the buildings themselves, because, you know, there would be more. So things like lanterns or these large kind of path lighting elements that would be used during the night and would provide a lot more kind of these little detail elements, usually found on the corners of these kind of raised platforms that we were using kind of around the base of a lot of these structures. But beyond that, everything is basically here, and this area is just, it's just so cool to see all the roofs in here. You get your little window differences between the 2 left and right buildings themselves, a lot of columns holding up the roof lines and creating a lot of visual kind of interest. On the upper section, you can see the pagoda in the background there and everything that we built on that side. So as everything becomes closer to completion and just more work done, I'm just really happy with how all this is turning out. Now, my FPS is slowly starting to take a hit, but I think it's definitely worth it to continue, and this is something that I'm going to take to 100% because I think giving up at this point is just not feasible. I've spent too much time making these little roof tiles to just give up now. The new little gazebo turned out great. with that wooden trim, and it does fit that little left jut in the wall there rather nicely. I think it is a little bit off from my reference material, but I think there's enough technically off that at this point, you know, it's more like a loose reference in some areas, and I'm fine with that because I think making it your own a little bit in a way helps, because it helps you kind of use that information later down the line for yourself a little bit easier. Now, there are plenty of green elements along the southern end, and you know, as we progress down the mountain, this will get filled in even more. But even at this just kind of a low level of greenery, it's just looking nice, and I'm at a good spot to move northward up into the main living quarter for like Tenzin's family and things. So there's going to be a staircase here in between these two buildings, which goes up to an entrance. This path on the right goes up to an entrance. There's a cool water garden-like area back here as well, so we'll get a water element, which will be nice because it'll reflect a lot of these tall buildings around and create a mirroring effect. And just overall, this is just a really cool and well-designed structure from the cartoonists and storytellers that made this series. So big kudos to them for sure. Now, obviously, the trail down here is going to be a challenge later on, but I think we can tackle it. That bridge will be cool to work on. I haven't really made many bridges in Planet Coaster, but luckily we don't have to worry too much about the path actually going across it. So we'll be able to make this thing fairly rounded and smooth looking, and I'm excited to get working on that. Here next month, the new patch will hit, so the 4,000 part limit on blueprints are going to be amazing as well. We're also going to, I think, maybe, if you guys are interested, start a new park at that point as well. I've been kind of itching to make something new, something a little bit more believable. I wouldn't say realistic. Realistic isn't necessarily my strongest suit in this game, but believability or just the rule of cool kind of applies at all times with me. So that's what I'm shooting for here in the upcoming month. But this is where I'm going to end this episode today. So if you guys enjoy Planet Coaster, definitely leave a like. It's how I gauge how well a series is doing, and you guys, you know, if you want to see more or not. Leave a comment down below if you guys have any feedback for the layout of this, or if you have any suggestions for detailing out anything. If anything's missing in the plaza or little details we can work on later, let me know that as soon as possible. And until then, thank you guys so much for watching. Check out my other videos, and I'll see you all next time.